Today we're getting our first design practice in Figma. We're going to build this cool antique hotel landing page. The idea from this whole design came from this pretty cool background image that I found on Unsplash. They've got lots of awesome images, and if you spend enough time looking around on there, you're sure to find something that should spark your inspiration. This is a hero landing page for a fictional hotel company that I'm calling Gotham Hotels. Seemed like a suiting dark name, and this seemed like a suiting dark hotel to stay at. Features some pretty nice handwritten styled calligraphy text, as well as a modern date and location picker for your rooms. The idea here is you could pick your location, check in, check out, and then a number of people, and then go ahead and start the booking process. There's also an ability to search for whatever's on the site. Maybe they have a blog, or maybe you could search for different locations. All the nav items are hidden under this hamburger menu, and then scrolling down would show the rest of this website, which actually I'm thinking of expanding in future videos. As we learn more techniques, we may use this as a base and build out the rest of this page as well as perhaps other pages. We'll just see kind of how things go. Let's look at the icons first, since I think they'll be the easiest thing to knock out. These icons come from a service called Font Awesome. If you haven't heard of them, take a look. Some are free and some are paid. If you kickstarted them back in the day, I think you have the paid version for forever, but I do think they use a monthly payment service. Although honestly, I'm not sure. I did it years ago and I haven't paid anything since, so I'm not really sure what their current solution is. But they've got tons of icons, and each icon comes in 3 to 4 different styles. So usually it's enough variety to get your designs going in the right direction. And then if you want to use something a bit more unique, you can always change them out later. But for now, they should work pretty well for this video. I'm going to go ahead and copy all these icons just so we have them all grouped together to reference in our new file. That way we don't have to keep scrolling back here. I also don't want to go back to Font Awesome and dig around for these when I can have them all located here. All right, so first things first, let's make a frame to store all this content in. This design was originally done with the MacBook Pro preset, which is just 1440 by 900. So we're going to go ahead and do that again. We do that by making a frame, which if you remember is the F hotkey. And then we can select MacBook Pro here on the right hand side sidebar. And then we'll rename this to Home. All right, awesome. Now, like I was saying earlier, one of my big inspirations for this whole design came from that image. And I found it on Unsplash, just looking under the architecture category. Go ahead and paste that in here. Perfect. Now this image to me is so cool. It's got these really slick leading lines pulling your eye to the center of the page here, as well as a really nice dark, moody, industrial vibe with this slight gold and bronze accent. Colors that I really enjoy personally. But as much as I love this image, it's a bit too detailed to act as a background image. You don't want your background image to detract from the content, especially on a service where the content is king. You know, when you go to a hotel's website, while you do want pictures of the room and the service, you don't want it to detract from check-in, check-out information or pricing or the critical information. You want that to be front and center. So we're going to detract the attention from this image by creating a radial gradient, almost like a vignette around this image. To do that, I went ahead and pressed R and made a rectangle. We're going to call this darken. And then on the fill section, I changed it from a solid fill to a radial fill. And then both these blocks I made black. And then I inversed them by just dragging them to each side. And then this dark corner now is this block right here. You also can see it visualized for you on the shape itself, which is pretty slick. But we're concerned now with this outer edge. It's too dark. Let's go ahead and make that, say, 65. Perfect. Just enough to keep the color and direction from the lines, but enough to pull it away from your eyes so that the content can come forward. All right. Now, one of the other design elements this site had was this combination of sans serif and serif fonts. The nice big header font that was used in the original design is a font called Lobster, and that is a font from Google Fonts. So that means you can get it for free. Figma also comes included with all the Google fonts, so you don't have to download any of them. They're all just loaded in automatically for you. So let's go ahead and select our text layer we just made, change the font family to Lobster, and let's change the size to 70? 70 sound good? No, let's do 90. Let's make it 90. All right. And then the color, let's go ahead and use this yellow 500 color, which has a hex of ECC94B, in case you want to use that as well. I know it doesn't show it here. I can also unlink it there so you can see the hex value. And now we've got our main header font. So let's go ahead and center that up. You can do that by dragging a layer around, and as you center it horizontally or vertically on the artboard or the frame or the group or whatever you're inside of, it'll show you these centering lines. You'll see them snap red, and that lets you know that you have centered it on that axis of the line. So this would be vertical, or this would be horizontal, and this would be this would be vertical. But you've centered it in the center, and this would be centered horizontally. Sorry, lots of words and lots of lines to look at. Okay, cool. But we got our text. Let's go ahead and change this now. Move this up a bit. And then make sure we change the alignment to be centered. So while we have it centered here, if we were to start typing with left alignment, it removes our centered alignment that we just made. So to keep that, we can change the text alignment to be centered, which means as we type, it will stay centered where we placed it. So the little tagline I had for this site was antique, vintage, classy. I think that'll be pretty cool. Move this up just a bit more. Awesome. All right, so that's going to set the tone for this, right? We've got this sort of modern mixed with almost a steampunk Fallout vibe. I think those are some pretty cool ideas to incorporate into this. Let's knock out the navigation bar next. So I'm going to make a rectangle, and I'm going to draw it out at about 70 pixels in height. Now, we're not actually going to use this as a background, but I'm going to use this to help align the content that we put in here, align them all centered between this imaginary navigation bar height. So I'm going to call this nav background. I'm going to group it by pressing Ctrl G, call this nav. And then I'm going to take this fill, and I'm just going to drop its opacity way down. We're just going to do that in the meantime. All right, so now our first icon is this little hotel icon. Again, these are from Font Awesome. Go ahead and move that icon in here. And this will act as our brand logo, our imaginary brand logo. And then we're going to make this, I think I was doing about 122 pixels out because that aligns with the 12 column grid. So let's talk about that grid real quick. So something very helpful to do when working on design work is to align your content to a grid or to columns. This now is this is a very common design technique, as it was back in the day when doing like more print design. It used to not be as popular for doing web design because it was a hard thing to replicate. But now that we have CSS Grid and Flexbox, it's much easier, if not totally possible, to replicate a column layout one-to-one. So don't be afraid to use your columns. They're very powerful and can help with alignment. And Figma, they're very easy to use. You don't have to hand draw any of them. If you just select a frame, you can come over to that, again, right-hand side navigation, and you can see where all your properties are. And we'll just enable the layout grid by adding a layout grid to this. By default, it's a small 10 pixel grid. Let's click on it and change it from a grid type to a column type, kind of like changing a fill from a fill to like a radial. You have that little top drop down button right here. And we're going to do a 12 column count grid. And then we'll leave the gutter at 20, I think is fine. I think I used 20 in the original one as well. Yeah. So we'll leave the gutter at 20. And that's where we got that 122 pixel distance from. And we can see now that we have this this icon inside this navigation component, or this navigation group. If we hold down Alt, we can see now our guides are showing us the vertical spacing inside just this navigation. So now it'd be really easy for us to align all the content in the center of this navigation bar without having to worry about it showing us the spacing to the bottom of the page. We can just focus on this. Let's go ahead and add our logo text. I think we call it Gotham Hotels. And then we're going to select all of this, change the font to Roboto, and then we're going to drop down that size. Actually, I think I used Gotham. You can use Roboto or Gotham. They're close enough. You won't really tell a difference in these designs, although Gotham is a bit more prominent in terms of strong headings, but these are some smaller text, so you can get away with either. Gotham is a paid font, so that's why I'm saying if you don't have Gotham, feel free to use Roboto, or even Lotto works really well as a good alternative. I think Lotto would be a better Gotham alternative than Roboto is, but anyways, let's go ahead and make this about 18 pixels. Let's make this a bold font. Then we'll make this yellow, the yellow we're already using. Figma will show you your document colors. And we know right now there's only one yellow being used, so we can select that, and that will give us the yellow that we've used already. And let's go ahead and maybe give this about an 8 pixel spacing, and then we'll align it vertically again, so 24, 24 top and bottom. And then I'm going to group these two together by selecting both layers, and then Control G to group them as the main logo. Cool. All right, now let's quickly add our right-hand side components. We have the search button and the hamburger button. We'll just drag those into here, and we'll move them underneath the nav group. And then I think we were doing, yeah, just one column out. So we had one column plus the gutter of spacing. So we'll do that over here. Center them vertically up 26, 26, one column plus gutter of spacing. And there's our navigation. Now we can go ahead and hide our columns by going over to the main frame and pressing the I button. The I button will just hide a layer or hide a property as opposed to removing a property. So we can re-enable it just by pressing the I button one more time. All right, and now we're going to remove the fill from the nav background like this. Awesome, there's our main navigation right there. Now let's add that little read more or scroll for more little tip down at the bottom. This acts as a way for the user to know what's below the fold, as the idea for this landing page is to be a full screen experience. So whatever the height of your window, this would fill up that height. And then we just provide the user a nice prompt to scroll down if they want more information. So let's go ahead and press our text tool by pressing T. And then let's go ahead and click down here and start typing find out more. We can't see it because it's a black on a black background, so we'll select all of it. Again, go down to our color and select that yellow that we have in the document already. And then let's change this from bold to I think book works fine. And then let's make it a little bit smaller. I think it's a little too big currently. So we will center it and then drop the font size down to 13. Maybe bring the weight up to a medium. Yeah, I think that works well. And then the last icon we had for the main design is this little, actually a hand-drawn icon. Forgot about that one. So you don't always have to rely on an icon set to provide simple things like this scroll down arrow. This scroll down arrow was done with the pen tool. We can go ahead and make it again really fast. So let's go ahead and press P for our pen tool. Let's click in an area, hold down Shift to lock it to increments. This is 90, 45, and we'll just go up maybe to here, click, holding down Shift. We're just going to pull this out, maybe here, and then, oh, see, we missed it. It's okay. I'm going to still click here, and then I'm going to press A. I'm going to go over here and press move with V. Sorry, I'm going to move this point out 2 spaces, and then I'm going to increase the stroke, set it to inside, set the color to yellow, or set it to center, decrease the size of this, and then I'll change the stroke type with this little overflow button to be rounded. Have all these selected, and there we go. That's the little scroll down arrow that we had over there, but we don't need it. We already have one, so go ahead and delete it. And I'm going to make this centered on the page. You can see it is aligned. And then we'll do maybe about 24 below that. I think sounds like a good amount. We want just enough breathing room to know these are connected, but not enough to where they're tied together. That way it sort of leads you down, right? You don't want this to all be one element. I want it to act as almost like those theater lights, right? You walk into a theater and those lights guide you. This will help guide you down because of its spacing leading you there. All right, cool. So we've got the majority of this done. Now, the last thing we have is designing that big date selector and the main call to action, which was book now. So let's go ahead and get that going. Start by making a rectangle, and we're gonna make this pretty big. Like, let's do 1100 pixels in terms of width, and then we'll do about 130 for height. And then we want to center this up on the frame. We can drag it by hand and align it with the automatic red line snapping. We also can use these tools at the top right here, which will allow us to align this layer. Let's go ahead and press align center. And then we'll do align vertical center as well. But we're going to drop this down a bit more, maybe about 4 shift arrow key increments, which is about 40 pixels down from the center. That feels pretty good. We can change this if needed. All right, so then the background for this, we should go ahead and make that a little off blue. We've got a lot of yellow, and we need to accent that with a nice complementary color. We can do that by using one of these off grays, I think might work well. Let's see. Maybe all the way down. Yeah, gray 9. So this gray is a bluish hued gray, so it's got a nice slight blue tint to it. Really helps accent all this yellow and allows your eye to rest more comfortably on it as opposed to all the harsher yellows, which do look good, but they are a little bit aggressive on the eye. All right, cool. So we've got this done. Now we need to lay out those sections. In the original design, we've got 4 things. We have the location picker, check-in, check-out, and a person counter, as well as a book now button. So let's do the book now button. I think that'll be pretty easy. Do another, let's group this up first. So we have this selected. Go ahead and Control G. We'll group this as CTA for call to action. Then we'll call this background. And then let's group these two while we're grouping stuff. Let's group these two bottom things together and we'll call this scroll info. All right, I just like to keep things organized. I recommend you do too. Definitely makes going through old files much easier. And if anyone else looks at them, they'll understand what's going on. The last thing you want to do is to be that designer who doesn't name their layers or groups, hand off a PSD or a file to somebody and say, good luck, you will not be liked. Don't be that person. All right, cool. So let's make that button. R for a rectangle, draw a button out. Let's make this about 60 pixels tall. And that should be wide enough. We will call this background. We will group this with Control G, call this CTA button. We will move it under the CTA group. And then for the fill, we want to use that existing yellow. And then all we gotta do now is add our text to the button group. So make sure the button group is selected, T for text tool, click inside, and we'll call this book now. And we'll set the weight to bold. I want to use a little bit of an off gray color. So I'll use that same gray that we're using for this background. I will use here. And let's go ahead and make this a bit bigger, say 20. And then make sure it's centered in the button. So we just need to move that over one. The width is not divisible by, or it's an odd number here, so we're gonna get the inability to center this. We could just make this 1 pixel wider, so we'll just go ahead and do that, why not? Now we can make it even. And then I'm gonna make this about 40 pixels out from the edge. And then we want me to drag that under that group. And then let's add a drop shadow to really help pull your eye to this call of action. You really want your call to action to be evident. You want to draw your user's eye to it. You don't want them looking for what to do. You want to show them what to do. So we will first center this up in this box here. And then there's a nice plugin that auto generates shadows for you. You can totally do this by hand, but this plugin speeds it up. It's called Shadow Picker. And one thing cool that it does is it will inherit the color. Make sure the background is selected. It will inherit the color of whatever shape you have selected. And then we'll do maybe like a large shadow. Nice. So you see there's a, there's a slight yellow hint to that shadow, and that really just kind of helps this button glow. As opposed to acting more as a drop shadow, it'll help it act more as a glow, which I think looks really nice. All right, now we just need to make our 4 sections and we'll be done. We're getting really close. Hopefully you are still sticking with me, learning as we go along. Let's go ahead and get those groups done. So let's make the titles for the groups. And we'll have these done in the same size as this bottom thing right here. So actually, I'm just going to copy this, Control C for copy, come back to the CTA group with it selected, Control V for paste. And now we've got a label that we could call location. I'm going to do all caps for these. And then I'm going to make these bold. That should be good. I'm going to go ahead and move this. Let's do about 48 from the left. We'll probably adjust these positions afterwards once we see what the spacing looks like for all the different groups. All right, let's duplicate that, move it down, and let's make the description for this real quick. So we'll call this New California in Fallout. Make the color white, and we want to bring this down to book. And then we're going to bring the font size up to 16 so it's a bit more legible. And then we're going to align that to the edge of the location, maybe about 8 pixels down from it. Nice breathing room. All right, sweet. That's looking pretty good. I want this white to be a little less aggressive, so let's do this gray 200, just a little bit off white. Help it not be as blinding. We don't want it to compete with the yellow for intensity. Then you're just blinded everywhere. And let's group these up as a, we'll call this CTA section. So we're gonna have several of these. So let's actually make a component out of this. Should be, well, let's actually not. The reason I say not is I know that this text width is going to change a lot, and I'm going to have an icon next to it. And while we could design this component in a way that as the text width changes, we could change the width of the component to move the arrow, I don't want to get into that right now. We'll do that in a different video. For now, we're going to keep it a bit simpler. So just make it a group, and we'll duplicate this group a few times. And we're going to move them out. All right, so our different sections, we've got location and we've got check-in. And we actually want to make sure all these labels align left, so that way we don't have to readjust these. So go in and make that change. All right, we'll change this to checkout, and we'll change this to persons. All right, now this one moved because it was on text align centered. So when we changed the width of the text, it got smaller. So just move it back to align with this text, and then make sure it's on align left for text. And same thing for these. Make sure all these descriptor texts are aligned left, so that way they don't break their alignment with this label. All right, so check in. Let's do Friday, 22nd February of 2020. And then check out could be Sunday, February or 24th Feb 2020. And then let's do 2 persons. All right, cool. Now that we've got these groups, let's add the drop-down arrow. So these are drop downs. Right now they look just like text, but we can change that by showing their action with an arrow. Showing that they're a drop down is commonly done with an arrow or a button look. In this case, we're going for a pretty minimal version of this with just a arrow representing the drop down action of this descriptor text. I'm gonna make sure it's inside this group because we're gonna align these groups later. And then I'm gonna do about 12 pixels out and roughly the center of this text. I'm gonna copy that arrow, go inside this group, paste the arrow, move it out to the side of it, about 12 pixels roughly in the center. Again, select this group, go inside of it, paste the arrow, go to the right, yada, 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 12 pixels. And then this input is a number input. So the standard HTML number input shows 2 numbers or 2 arrows. There's an increase and decrease arrow. So we need to do that with our design as well. So we'll paste the arrow, go 12 pixels out again, but then we're gonna shrink it and duplicate it and rotate it. And that gives us a number input arrow amount. And I'm gonna increase the spacing for that a good amount. Say, well, let's double it. So it was 12, let's do 24. All right, now let's select all these groups. There's 4 of them. And if you remember in one of the earlier videos, I talked about the ability for Figma to align things to a grid. Well, this is a grid. There's 4 things, they're in 4 columns. So we can press this little auto align tool. And right now you'll notice that there's uneven spacing between all these components. If we press this tool, it'll fix that and it will add an even amount of spacing between all of them, which is awesome. And I'm actually happy with that amount. It's 56, but in case we wanted to change it, we could just drag this and we can see how all of them change at once, which is super cool. But I'm gonna leave it at 56. I like working in a spacing amount of 8 pixel increments. It's not an exact science, but it works out pretty well. Definitely feel free to break that rule, but having some consistency in your spacing will help your design feel more even. You don't want random amounts of spacing unless that's really intentional. So if you're struggling to get your spacing right, I would recommend starting with an 8 pixel or 10 pixel spacing amount. You call it sometimes the spacing grid. That will just help your spacing and your white space to feel more consistent than just guessing and throwing them around. But with that, we have wrapped up this design. We've gotten a nice centered navigation bar, a cool theme, a nice clear call to action with enough breathable room to work with all the individual sections, and a simple informative tip for the user to scroll to the next section. We learned a couple things along the way: how to center items, aligning things automatically, working with different components. And I think we've gotten a nice foot in the door for doing design work in Figma. There's going to be more videos like this. I'm going to try and sprinkle in more tutorial focused videos like the first few of this series have been, with some of these design practice videos where it's more applying that information. So like I mentioned earlier about the component version of this group, we didn't do that now because I don't think we have a good foundation to do that. But after some videos covering responsive design in Figma, we might be able then to expand our designs to have those features. So moving forward, we're going to learn about masking and responsive design. Then we're going to get into prototyping with Figma, and then sharing these designs with others to look at, and then how the code view and some of the other small niceties of Figma will work out after you've got your design all wrapped up. But that's it. We've wrapped up this design. Be proud of what you've done. You put in a good half hour of work. That's the first step to getting better. Now moving forward, we're going to continue on our Figma for Beginners series with more foundational skills like the code view, masking, prototyping, and then we're going to take those skills into more design practice videos. Until then, I'm Max.